On the evening of February 9th, 1984, at 7:12 p.m., a single-ring phone call jolted the quiet suburban calm of the Harrington household in Rockville, Maryland, a neighborhood of trimmed hedges and families who believed the Cold War existed only on the evening news. The temperature outside hovered just below freezing. Patches of old snow clung stubbornly to the edges of driveways. Inside the two-story brick home on Maple Ridge Court, nothing appeared unusual, nothing that hinted at how profoundly the next 60 minutes would reshape the fate of every person inside it. The call lasted 9 seconds. No greeting, no demand. No voice at all at first, just a faint mechanical click that sounded like a long-distance transmission settling on the line. When Marilyn Harrington, age 41, picked up the kitchen phone, she heard a man breathing, steady and close to the microphone, as if deciding whether to speak. Then, in a low, unaccented whisper, he said only, "They're coming tonight." And the line went dead. Marilyn froze, hand still clutching the receiver, staring at the yellowed notepad magnet clipped to the fridge where she had just been writing a grocery list. For several seconds, she listened to the dial tone, half expecting the voice to return, half hoping she had imagined the entire thing. She hadn't. Upstairs, her husband Daniel Harrington, 44, was preparing tomorrow's briefing notes for his job at a defense logistics office in Arlington. Routine administrative work, nothing sensitive by his own understanding. Their children, Emily, 12, and Josh, 9, were arguing about whose turn it was to feed the dog. It was a completely ordinary Thursday evening in a house that had never known real danger, which is why Marilyn's reaction was not panic but disbelief. The Cold War had produced its share of urban myths. Misdialed payphone calls from KGB officers, coded warnings, accidental brush passes, but those belonged to someone else's life, not hers. Not a woman who drove carpool shifts and balanced PTA budgets. She put the receiver down slowly. She did not call the police. She did not tell her husband. She simply stood there, replaying the exact tone of the whisper in her mind, the certainty behind it, the calm urgency, the absolute lack of hesitation. Prank callers laughed. Wrong numbers apologized. This voice had done neither. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The heat clicked on. A car rolled past the house. The refrigerator compressor hummed back to life. Every mundane sound felt suddenly magnified, as if the house itself were holding its breath. At 7:28 p.m., Marilyn made her first mistake. One the FBI would later scrutinize for months. She dialed *69, hoping to trace the call. The automated message told her the number had been blocked from returning. She hung up, pulse quickening now in a way she could not explain. She tried to convince herself she was overreacting. At 7:34 p.m., as Marilyn finally walked upstairs to find Daniel, headlights swept across the front windows, slow, deliberate, too bright for a neighbor turning into their driveway. A black sedan rolled to a stop in front of the Harrington home. Another parked behind it. 4 men stepped out. Not Soviets, not strangers, FBI. And although none of the Harringtons knew it yet, the phone call had not been a prank, nor a warning meant for them. It was a misrouted message intended for someone else entirely, a Soviet asset several doors down, whose number differed by a single digit. But that 9-second mistake was enough to unravel the Harrington family's entire life. At 7:36 p.m., before Marilyn could reach the top step, the unmistakable pounding of a government-issued fist rattled the front door. 3 sharp blows, spaced evenly, the kind of knock designed not to request entry, but to announce authority. Daniel looked up from his papers, confused, then concerned. then suddenly alert in a way Marilyn had not seen since the DC sniper scare 2 years earlier. "Marilyn? Who is that?" he called from the landing, tie loosened, glasses slipping slightly down his nose. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes were fixed on the front window, where the silhouettes of several men stood still as statues. No neighbors approached, no porch lights flicked on. Whatever was about to happen was not meant for an audience. Another knock, louder this time. "FBI. Open the door." Emily and Josh appeared at the top of the stairs. Wide-eyed, the dog began barking wildly, scrambling across the hardwood floor. Daniel hurried down the steps, each footfall echoing like an accusation. When he opened the door, a blast of cold air swept through the hallway. 4 agents stepped inside, without waiting to be invited, standard protocol when executing a rapid response operation. Their expressions were grim but controlled, the kind of faces that had rehearsed this exact moment 100 times in training rooms that simulated American homes just like this one. The man in front, Special Agent Warren McClellan, held up his credentials, though Daniel barely registered them. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington," he said, "we need to speak with your family immediately. It's urgent." "Is locked? Urgent about what?" Daniel demanded, instinctively positioning himself between the agents and his children. "What is going on? Has there been an accident?" "It concerns potential contact from a foreign intelligence service," McClellan said. "We have reason to believe your home may be compromised." The words sliced through the air. Foreign intelligence. Compromised. Marilyn's breath caught in her throat. She heard again the whisper on the phone. "They're coming tonight. Take the children. Leave now." It hadn't been a prank. She knew it instantly. She felt the truth settle over her like ice. "We received a call," she began. "We'll get to that," he said. "Right now, we need everyone together." The agents gathered the Harringtons in the living room, lowering the blinds with practiced efficiency. One agent swept the downstairs rooms with a handheld frequency scanner. Another examined the phone line. A third positioned himself near the back door in case anyone tried to approach the house. The children clung to each other, confused and pale. Daniel kept asking variations of the same question. "Why us? What is this about? We haven't done anything." But no one answered. Protocol dictated minimal disclosure until the premises were secured. At 7:49 p.m., McClellan finally spoke. "Mrs. Harrington, earlier this evening, did you receive any unusual phone calls?" The room went silent. Marilyn nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "A man told me to take the children and leave. He said they were coming tonight." "Did he identify himself?" "No." "Did he sound foreign?" "I don't know. Just calm." "Certain." McClellan exchanged a brief, tight look with the other agents. A look that said everything Marilyn didn't understand yet. "That call wasn't meant for you," he said. "A Soviet source embedded in this neighborhood is expecting extraction. We intercepted intelligence, suggesting his handlers would warn him sometime this week." Misdialed. A single wrong digit had placed the Harrington family squarely inside an active counterintelligence operation. Daniel's jaw tightened. His mind raced through every possibility. Had he been followed? Had he said something at work? Had a neighbor reported them? Had the Soviets targeted his family for leverage? McClellan continued. "Once a warning is issued, Soviet illegals often flee within minutes. When we saw activity near your house immediately after the call, we had to assume your family was involved or in danger, until we determine otherwise." "You're all coming with us," Emily gasped. Josh started crying. Marilyn grabbed their hands, her own shaking uncontrollably. "But we haven't done anything." McClellan didn't flinch. Sir, tonight, that doesn't matter. At 8:02 p.m., as two black sedans pulled away with the entire Harrington family inside, the real intended recipient of the warning, a Soviet sleeper agent, 3 doors down, stood at his own window, watching the taillights disappear. He smiled. He now had the head start he needed. The drive to the Washington field office took 23 minutes, though to the Harringtons it felt like an hour suspended outside normal time. The children sat in the back seat of the first sedan, flanked by 2 agents who tried awkwardly, unsuccessfully, to reassure them that everything was just precautionary. Separated by the center console, each gripping the armrest as if the leather itself were a lifeline. Every few blocks, Daniel leaned forward. "Can someone please explain what exactly you think we've done?" But the agents didn't answer. They weren't stonewalling out of hostility. They simply didn't know yet whether the people in the back seat were victims, witnesses, or something far worse. In the Cold War, assumptions could get agents killed, operations blown, or innocent people destroyed. By 8:25 p.m., both vehicles rolled into the underground garage of the field office, a concrete cavern humming with fluorescent lights and coded access points. The Harringtons were escorted inside past security doors, through the metal detector, down a sterile hallway where every footstep echoed too loudly in the tension-heavy air. They were placed in interview room 4, a rectangular space with pale gray walls, a table bolted to the floor, and chairs that seemed intentionally uncomfortable. The children were taken to another room, with a social services liaison standard practice when minors were involved in national security investigations. For the first time since the knock on their door, Marilyn felt something inside her crack. Agent McClellan entered with a folder under his arm, followed by Special Agent Karen Lively, a counterintelligence analyst whose expertise lay in identifying Soviet illegals agents living under deep cover for years, often decades, in American suburbs, just like the Harringtons. McClellan set the folder down. "Mr. Harrington," he began, "you have access to distribution networks, procurement schedules, and classified supply chain data for naval systems. That makes you a potential target." Daniel's mouth fell open. "I process shipping spreadsheets," he said. "I reorder parts. I sign paperwork. I don't have access to anything that would interest the Soviets." Lively opened the folder, sliding a page toward him. He recognized his own department letterhead immediately, an internal memo he'd written 2 weeks earlier about backlogs in submarine component shipments. "That memo circulated through 3 defense contractors," she said, "2 of which we believe are being targeted by Soviet intelligence. The Soviets don't just want top-secret documents, Mr. Harrington. They want patterns, timelines, delays, vulnerabilities. Supply chain data gives them insight into readiness." Abraz the Greys, Daniel stared at the page as if it were evidence of a life he had never lived. "But I haven't given anything to anyone," he whispered. McClellan nodded. "We're not accusing you. We're trying to determine why a Soviet handler contacted your number tonight. It was a misdial," Marilyn said softly. "You said so yourself." "Maybe," Lively replied, "but we can't assume that. Not yet." She leaned forward, clasping her hands. "Mrs. Harrington, I need you to walk us through that phone call again. Word for word. Everything you heard." Marilyn repeated it, the click, the breathing, the whisper. As she spoke, Lively took notes with the practiced speed of someone who had spent years parsing tiny details that often meant the difference between truth and deception. When Marilyn finished, Lively closed her pen. That phrase, "they're coming tonight," matches language used in 2 previous Soviet extraction operations. Same cadence, same sense of urgency. But here's what matters most. She looked directly at them. This caller expected the person who answered to already know what it meant. The implication hit the room like a dropped weight. If the call was truly a misdial, then someone with Soviet ties lived very close to the Harringtons. Daniel felt a cold prickle crawl up his spine. Their street had always felt safe. Kids playing tag between driveways. Retired couples trimming azalea bushes. But someone had been living a second life behind a curtain of familiarity. Someone who had just been warned to disappear. Marilyn's voice trembled. "Are we in danger?" Lively didn't answer immediately. When she finally did, it was quiet, deliberate. "Mrs. Harrington, if the Soviets believe they've been exposed, they don't leave loose ends. If they think you intercepted something, the risk isn't zero." Alder 7. Daniel reached for Marilyn's hand. In that moment, under the fluorescent lights of interview room 4, the Harringtons began to realize that the phone call had not pulled them into someone else's crisis. It had detonated directly under their own lives. The agents didn't allow the Harringtons to go home that night. Not when the message, whoever it was meant for, had come from someone inside Soviet intelligence. Not when the recipient was still unidentified. Not when the phrase, "they're coming tonight," could mean anything, from extraction to retaliation. Instead, the family was moved to a temporary safe apartment owned by the Bureau, a cramped, musty two-bedroom unit in Arlington that smelled faintly of old carpet and stale air. An agent stayed outside their door. Another patrolled the parking lot. Nothing felt familiar. Nothing felt theirs. Marilyn sat awake on the sofa, wrapped in a thin, government-issued blanket, watching the streetlights glow against the blinds. Daniel paced. He'd been pacing for hours, wearing a path into the carpet at 2:17 a.m. There was a soft knock. Agent Lively stepped inside, carrying a manila folder thick enough to make Marilyn's stomach twist. "We think we know who the call was meant for," she said. Daniel stopped pacing. Marilyn rose from the couch, instinctively bracing herself. Lively opened the folder. "Your next-door neighbors, the Rasmussens." For a moment, the words didn't register. The Rasmussens? The quiet couple who brought cookies to neighborhood potlucks? The ones who lent Marilyn their ladder last summer? The ones whose daughter mowed lawns for extra money? Marilyn shook her head, unable to reconcile the image. "That can't be." Lively exhaled through her nose, the kind of sigh reserved for moments when she'd had to deliver this same truth to families before. "In the Cold War," she said, "normal is a disguise." She laid out a series of photographs, grainy surveillance images captured earlier that evening. In the first photo, Paul Rasmussen was walking down a quiet Georgetown alley. In the second, he was speaking with a man whose face had been obscured before the camera got a clear angle. In the third, Paul slipped a small envelope into the man's coat pocket fast, subtle, practiced. Daniel stared. "You're saying Paul is a Soviet agent?" Lively shook her head gently. "I'm saying we have reason to believe the Rasmussens are illegals, deep-cover operatives, possibly here for more than a decade, maybe longer." "It's a Zay." Marilyn felt weight settle over her chest, thick and suffocating. "But why would the call come to our house?" "Because," Lively said, "your phone number is one digit off theirs. It's likely the caller misdialed something that has never happened before, or at least never mattered." Her voice grew quieter, more serious. "But tonight, it did," she continued. "Based on the phrasing, the handler was warning them that their cover's been compromised. Our team believes another Soviet source inside D.C. was arrested earlier today. That arrest may have triggered an extraction protocol." Daniel swallowed hard. "Meaning they disappear," Lively said. "Erase everything. Burn documents, remove evidence, and get out before we close in. They don't say goodbye. They don't pack. They just vanish. Marilyn shivered. Did they leave? She asked. Lively's expression darkened. We did. In flight, she placed a final photograph on the table. It showed the Rasmussens' front door. From less than an hour earlier, the door was open. The lights were on. Dinner was still on the table. A pot on the stove had boiled dry. The family cat sat alone on the kitchen counter. They left. Lively said softly. Fast. Very fast. Marilyn pressed a hand to her mouth. The reality was no longer theoretical or distant. It was right next door. It had been beside them for years. Daniel pulled a chair out and sat heavily, staring at the photograph, his voice barely audible. So all this happened because of one wrong phone call? Lively met his eyes. No, Mr. Harrington. All this happened because when a Soviet network collapses, every loose thread becomes a danger. That caller thought they were warning Paul Rasmussen. Instead, they warned you. Silence engulfed the room, heavy, electric, terrifying. The Harringtons had not stumbled into the Cold War. It had been living beside them all along. Morning arrived without ever feeling like night had truly passed. The Harringtons sat around the small kitchen table of the safe apartment, untouched bowls of cereal growing soggy between them. No one had slept, no one even tried. At 8:12 a.m., another knock came, firmer this time, urgent in a way that made Marilyn's pulse jump. Agent Lively entered with two other agents in tow, their faces carrying the kind of controlled tension that meant something had shifted overnight. We searched the Rasmussen house, Lively said, placing a thin folder on the table. She opened it to a photograph. A single sheet of paper, typed, precise, folded once. It was taped under their daughter's mattress, she said. A letter addressed to no one by name. You should read it. Daniel picked it up, his hand trembling. The message was short, barely a paragraph. If they ever come for us, understand we had no choice. We were placed here, not born here. Nothing about our lives was ours to keep. Forgive us. The words hit Marilyn unexpectedly hard. She had expected anger, fear, betrayal, even contempt. But this was something else. A quiet confession from people who had lived a lie so long they no longer knew another truth. Did they leave anything else? Daniel asked. Lively nodded. Documents burned in the fireplace. Ashes of photographs. Their hardline radio transmitter dismantled and gone. Whoever they were professionals. They cleaned house in under an hour. Marilyn's voice cracked. What happens to us now? The agent exchanged a look with her colleagues, one of those subtle, bureaucratic glances that said nothing is simple anymore. Because the call came to your home, Lively said, the Bureau has to treat your family as potential secondary contacts. We have to assume the KGB may think you're connected to the Rasmussens, even by accident. Daniel stared at her. You're saying they might come after us? We don't know, Lively admitted. But when trained operatives disappear overnight, the network around them destabilizes. People panic. Mistakes happen. Retaliation happens. A chill moved across the room. Marilyn's spoon clattered against her untouched cereal. So we stay here. For how long? Until we understand what the Soviets were planning and whether your family is part of it intentionally or not. Daniel exhaled sharply, frustration boiling beneath exhaustion. That's exactly why this is complicated, Lively said. Silence fell again. Quiet, tight, suffocating. Lively closed the folder. For your safety, we need to move you again. The Rasmussens weren't low-level assets. They were long-term embeds. And long-term embeds don't run unless something has gone terribly wrong. Marilyn swallowed. We were just eating dinner next door last month, and they were trained to make you believe every bit of it. Lively said gently. That's what makes them effective. She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Pack your things. We leave in 10 minutes. In that moment, the Harrington family finally understood. They weren't bystanders anymore. They were now part of a story they didn't ask to enter, and the Cold War was done pretending it didn't know their names. The new safe house was smaller and older than the last peeling wallpaper, a low humming refrigerator, a single lamp that made the room feel more like an interrogation cell than a place of protection. The Harrington family sat together in a tense, brittle silence, as if the wrong movement might cause the world to tilt again. Agent Lively returned mid-morning, carrying a portable reel-to-reel recorder. She set the machine on the kitchen table. A harsh wave of static filled the room, followed by a pattern of sharp, deliberate clicks. 3. Pause. 2. Pause. 4. Pause. It's not Morse, Lively explained. It's a Soviet field signal. Short range. Hard to trace. Daniel leaned in. A trigger, she said. Marilyn felt her fingers curl tightly against her palms. A trigger for what? To run. Destroy evidence. Change location. It depends on the network. She let the clicks play another few seconds before shutting the recorder off. Daniel frowned. But they'd already left before that was sent. Something must have made them accelerate. Lively hesitated. We think the phone call to your house did that. Marilyn stared at her. But it was just breathing. That was the signal. Lively replied. Not all codes are spoken. Sometimes the act is the message. Daniel's confusion hardened into disbelief. You're saying our phone number was part of their escape plan. Your line wasn't flagged for Soviet contact, Lively said. That made it valuable. Safe. Invisible. The realization settled over the room like a slow, heavy fog. The Rasmussens hadn't called for help. They had used the Harringtons as a relay, a silent bridge to Moscow. Marilyn finally asked the question, sitting in all their faces. What happens when the people waiting on the other side realize the Rasmussens aren't responding? Lively closed the recorder with a soft click. That's what worries us, she said, because when a coded message goes unanswered in the middle of the Cold War, the waiting was the worst part. Not the safe house, not the agents coming and going, not even the knowledge that a Soviet network had brushed against their lives like a match against dry tinder. It was the waiting, raw, quiet, stretching into days that changed the Harrington family. By the third day in the safe house, the children had stopped asking when they could go home. Daniel no longer pressed his face to the window, trying to judge by the number of passing cars whether the world outside was normal. And Marilyn had learned to recognize the sound of agents whispering in the hallway, voices carrying the clipped tone of people searching for a pattern they could not yet see. On the morning of the fourth day, Agent Lively arrived, carrying another file. We found where the Rasmussens abandoned their car, she said. A rest stop off I-70. Clean. No prints. They left on foot. Daniel's jaw tightened. Do you think they're still in the country? People like them don't vanish. By who? Marilyn asked. That, she said quietly, is what we're trying to determine. She placed a single photograph on the table. A grainy image, taken from a highway camera. A man and a woman walking along the shoulder. Backpacks, heads down. The Rasmussens, still together, still moving, heading west. Marilyn swallowed hard. Are they trying to reach someone? Possibly. Or trying to get far enough from the signal they sent through your line. Daniel blinked. What signal? Lively hesitated for the first time since they'd met her. We found out something else, she said. Your home number wasn't chosen because it was clean. It was chosen because it used to belong to someone else. A contact in a previous Soviet network. A dead drop that hadn't been used in years. Marilyn felt her breath catch. So the Rasmussens thought they were calling a safe number. A number Moscow might still be monitoring. When you answered, they realized something was wrong. Very wrong. And they panicked. Daniel's shoulders slumped. We were never targets. No. Just an accident in the system. A loose wire connecting two parts of a machine that should never have touched. The room went silent. Accidental or not, it had been enough to send an entire Soviet cell into flight, and enough to put an innocent American family under federal protection. A moment later, Lively added, "You'll be able to go home soon, but things may not feel normal for a while. You'll hear from us from time to time, just routine follow-ups." Daniel nodded, but his eyes stayed distant. The children stared at the photograph of the Rasmussens. Two shadows, walking into a future no one would see them reach. Marilyn finally asked the question that had been pressing on her since the first knock on their door. Will they ever catch them? Lively looked down at the file. Then at the family she had spent the last days protecting. In Espionage, she said gently, catching someone isn't always the same as finding them. Which one tone? She gathered her things, nodded a quiet goodbye, and left them alone in the safe house's dim kitchen. Outside, the wind pushed across the empty road, carrying nothing but the hollow quiet of a world still at war in the shadows. And the Harringtons, an ordinary family, caught in a moment that was never meant for them, sat together, trying to understand how one phone call had pulled them into a cold war they never knew they were living through.